If you've been following my channel for any length of time, you've seen that I've created a number of videos on how to access Home Assistant and your local network resources remotely. There's a ton of different ways to do that, and I came across another one called Caddy. It's a reverse proxy that's similar to Nginx, but has a lot of other features as well. It's a little more complicated than just setting up an Nginx reverse proxy, but I'm going to take you through that today. We're going to put together a couple of sites and show you how I use my Home Assistant Yellow to proxy websites into my local network and to also connect to the Home Assistant Yellow remotely. So let's get started. So let's talk about what Caddy is. They call it the ultimate server. It is a powerful enterprise-ready open source web server, automatic HTTPS. It's written in Go. This automatic HTTPS means it's automatically going to convert to HTTPS if you put HTTP in. Makes it a little more secure. It takes care of TLS certificate renewal, so it will do a renewal for you, OSCSP stapling, static file serving, and all of these other things. It runs in containers that has zero dependencies. You can run it practically anywhere. We're going to use a Home Assistant add-on to do that. It has, as I mentioned, it converts to HTTPS automatically. It automatically renews your certificates. It's written in Go, so it's greater memory safety than servers written in C, hardened TLS stack, et cetera, et cetera. And what else here? It can be a flexible file server and a scalable reverse proxy. So what we're going to do today is we're going to install this in Home Assistant. So I'm going to go to my Home Assistant Yellow, and I've already got it installed. So I'm going to show you how I did that. I'm just going to go into my add-ons dashboard, and I'm going to click on the add-on store over here on the bottom right. Now, one of the things you have to do is you have to go ahead and install this repository. So we're going to copy this right here. All right, so I've copied that in here. I'm going to go into Home Assistant, and I'm going to click on these three dots up here, and I want to add a repository. In this case, we're going to add that one I just put in there. You just paste that in here and click on Add. It's already in my store because I did this before to play around with it. So if you don't have it, it will go ahead and add it for you. You can see that it is right here. Once you do have that, all you have to do is search for Caddy, and you'll see that you have Caddy here as an add-on. This is an open source version of Caddy2, and that's what you want to use. You'll click on that, and it will go ahead and install it for you. Now, since I already have it installed, I'm not going to click on it. I'm just going to go over here, and I'm going to open it up. So let's find a Caddy over here. First thing we want to do is just take a quick look at the configuration options. And really, we're going to do this using what's called a Caddyfile. That's basically a configuration file. A lot of that you can put in here, but I find it much easier and much better to work with the Caddyfile than it is to try to go in here and try to put everything in directly. All of this stuff is going to get ignored here. The only thing we are going to put in here is our Cloudflare API token, and I'll explain that in just a minute because we're using Cloudflare for our TLS certificate challenge, or DNS challenge to get our TLS certificates. So we'll use that here in just a moment. Other than that, there's nothing else to put in here. All you need to do is we're going to start building out our Caddyfile. But before we do that, if you're going to use something like a DNS challenge, a lot of the DNS stuff does not come built into the stock Caddy. You have to actually add these things. So if we go over to the Caddy download page, and I'll put all this stuff in the link. You can obviously get to it from the Caddy page here as well by clicking download. But in the download page, you're going to want to first choose the platform that you're going to install it on. In my case, the HA Yellow is an ARM-based device. So I'm going to choose Linux ARM 7. I want the standard features. And then I want to go down here. I am going to use Cloudflare for my DNS challenge. So I'm going to click on Cloudflare. That's Caddy DNS Cloudflare. And if you're going to use Cloudflare as your reverse proxy, you will need to specify reverse proxy. So if you want to do that now, you can search for Cloudflare here. And you can also see that there's this Cloudflare IP, and you can select that as well. What it's going to do is when you go in here and you select these and you click on download, it's actually going to build that whole package for you, and you're going to use that Caddy file as the file that you're going to put into Home Assistant. So let me show you how that works while this is building. Now, sometimes you'll notice here it says some bugs in the go command sometimes cause the build to fail. This shouldn't take very long at all. I had to run it a couple times to get these packages that I wanted. So there are a number of different ways that you can actually build this Caddy file. We're going to use the terminal in Home Assistant to do that. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to choose terminal. So if I do an ls here, I'm going to have a directory called share. So if I change to the share directory, and then I do this again, I've already created a Caddy directory. So you would make a directory called Caddy. If it doesn't already exist, it may already exist for you. So you'd make a directory called Caddy. But since it already exists for me, I'm going to change that directory. And I'm going to create a file called Caddyfile. And I've already got that as well. But if you wanted to create it, you would use like nano or something like that and do that command to create the Caddy file. And you're going to put all of the information that you want to put into the Caddy file. Now, it's going to seem like a lot, but it really isn't. This is one way to do this. Now, for me, it's easier to edit something in Visual Studio Code. And the way I do that is I've mapped a drive from Home Assistant Yellow to my local desktop. And you can see that I have a number of mapped drives down here. All of these are my mapped drives that I use the Samba add-on for, or add-on with, and then I can map any of the directories. And so I've got my share directory mapped here, and I just open that in Visual Studio Code, and I can, it's simply as simple as going to a file folder in Windows. So I go to my share directory, Caddy, and then Caddyfile, and opens that Caddyfile. And that's what I'm in right here. I do it because it's easier to do this through the UI than it is to try to use the terminal. Sometimes the terminal commands get a little wonky, or you hit the wrong key and mess up everything. So here's my Caddy file. This stuff is all available on the internet. There are examples all over the place. But basically what you want is you want an email address up here. This is going to be the email address that you use to authenticate stuff like your DNS and other stuff. It's basically an identity that identifies you when you're going out and getting your certificates and whatnot. Servers, this is a section that I've added as a global trusted proxies. These are all the proxy servers that I add into Home Assistant, or that I get from Cloudflare, that allows me to connect from the Cloudflare caching service over to my proxy. If you don't have trusted proxies and you try to connect from a proxy, it's not going to work for you. It's just the same as when you're using Home Assistant with a proxy. You have to set up the trusted proxies in Home Assistant as well in order for that to work. Now, I've created a common section, and you can see that here. And all this code I'll post on my website so you can see it on the website. That way you have it available to you. But my common section does a couple of things. First of all, it says Cloudflare is my choice of DNS challenge provider. All of my stuff runs on Cloudflare. So what it does is it basically goes out just like Nginx Proxy Manager does, just like Let's Encrypt, like DuckDNS, all of those things. Maybe not DuckDNS, but all the other ones, they go out and they use a challenge method to determine that you're the owner of the domain. And then this is actually a valid request, and then it creates a certificate for you. It's pretty standard stuff. In order to get this, remember what I said before is you need to make sure that you have built this plugin with the DNS Cloudflare. Otherwise, you're going to get an error. If you're using other services such as Namecheap or something like that, I think Namecheap might actually be built into it. But there are other providers on here, and you can look through all of the DNS providers and see which one might be one that you can use. Route 53, DuckDNS. Lego Deprecated has a bunch of different ones, but you get the point here. You need to make sure that you have this particular module built into your Caddy file. And so let's go back over here, and that's what we're going to do here. You see this env CF API token? That is the token that I'm using in my add-on configuration. So back over here in Home Assistant, If we go into my add-on configuration and we see this value CF API token, and we look over here in our Caddyfile CF API token, that's where this is going to look for the token that you need in order to connect and log into Cloudflare. If you're using a different DNS challenge provider, then you would set this up similar to this. You would change the name here. Each one of them has its own environment requirements, like a username or password. You may have to specify more than one thing here. And then over here in your environment variables, you would specify the name, the password, whatever it is that you require for your DNS provider. For Cloudflare, it's just simply a token. So that's how we're going to do that. Okay, so we've got that common section for the DNS challenge. The rest of this is related to security. And I've copied this basically from some other examples. This is what I'm using, and it allows me to get an A+ rating for my domain. If I go over to securityheaders.com and I put in my domain and I scan it, then I get an A+ rating because I have all of the settings set properly so that it comes back and says I have good security on this site. If you didn't have some of these things, you might get a different rating here. And then you would go back in, it would explain to you what you need to set, and then you could change that in your settings. But I'm using this based on what I've read in other forums, and this gives me an A+ rating. So I'm good to go with that. And then we get into the couple sections that actually do the work of forwarding. So right now I am going to, if I go to caddy2.mostlychris.com, port 9999 locally, it's going to bring up this block. It's going to reverse proxy me over to this 158 address. And it's going to proxy to port 8123. Similarly, if I go to allscan.mostlychris.com, and by the way, all these domains are going to go away after I film the video, so don't worry about that. Again, port 999, that's the port that is being listened to by the proxy. So Caddy2 is listening on port 9999, but it's forwarding it over to different, or proxying over to different IP addresses. And there's two different versions of things I've got going on here. This one you see is proxying over to HTTPS. And in order to make that work, and it really depends on how you have your site set up. If you've got your site set up to use a self-signed certificate, you're going to have to tell the proxy to ignore the verification of the TLS certificate. And that's the case I have for my Home Assistant Yellow. I've played around with it enough. I've got SSL on it for other purposes. And so if I try to proxy to this using the IP address, it's not going to work. You can proxy to a fully qualified domain name as well if you want to, if that's something that resolves within your local network. But if you're using IP address, you want to set the transport to HTTP and then do a TLS insecure skip verify. That way it goes to the site, proxies it without worrying about that security. In the other example I have here, I do have a reverse proxy to a non-SSL based site. So I don't need any of this transport stuff. And the other thing to consider too is we've defined this common section up here, and we're importing all of that common information. You could define more than one common. You could call this whatever you wanted to up here as well. But you just import all of this stuff in here. And that way, if you're doing a whole bunch of websites, that you don't have to rewrite all of this. So that's the Caddy file. Now, this isn't going to work with the add-on that we have right now because we have this DNS Cloudflare stuff specified under our TLS section. Remember, I mentioned before that you need to go over to the download section and you need to actually choose the things that you want to build into your file, your binary. Now I've already built it, right? So I'm not going to go in here and make you watch me do all of this stuff again. This is where we need to make sure that we can access the share directory for the Home Assistant Yellow or wherever you're going to put this. And once again, I'm going to just come back to my Samba Share. If you want to use the Samba Share add-on for Home Assistant, then you can access it over your network. And so that's what I've done here. Again, I have the share directory. So if I go down here to the share directory, I have a Caddy directory here. If I open that, I have a file. This is the Caddy file. This is the file that you're going to get when you download or build the file under the download section. And once you get the download, you're going to want to put that download in this directory. So however you map this directory, you can, if you have SSH access to your Home Assistant device, you can SSH using or you can SCP it over or move it over, however you do that. The easiest way is install Samba. You can download or copy the Caddy. So I would just copy this, go to my share directory, and I would paste, or the Caddy directory, and I would paste it in here. And it would just put it in here. Here's my Caddy file. Now, the very important part of this is make sure that you rename it. So you want to rename it from this, whatever it comes down as, to Caddy, just straight Caddy. Because whenever the add-on starts, it's going to look in this directory. And if it finds this file, it's going to use that as a custom file. So let's go over to our Caddy add-on, or Caddy2. And let's assume now that we have downloaded the Caddy file. We've built the Caddy binary, and we've built the Caddy file. And we've set the configuration for our Cloudflare token or whatever our DNS is going to be. And I'm just going to, you would click on start. I'm just going to restart it. We'll look at the log here. All right, so in the logs, what you're going to see is preparing Caddy, found custom Caddy at share Caddy Caddy. What that means is it found that custom binary that has the Cloudflare DNS add-on in it. It also found a Caddy file at share Caddy Caddy file. The names have to be exact for it to find it. And then once it does that, it's going to load the configuration from the Caddy file. It's going to use this binary as the Caddy binary. And it's going to go in here, and if everything is correct, it will start serving out your content. If it's not, you'll get an error and it will shut down. So you need to go in here and make sure that you check this log file to see if it's running. Once it's up and running, then we can try to go to a domain, Caddy2. And you can see now it's loaded my Caddy2 domain. Here it is, caddy2.mostlychris.com. And port is 8443. Remember now, we specified 999 NAT, and in our router, we mapped 8443. Anything that comes on into that port goes to port 9999, which in our Caddy file is what the Caddy server is listening on. So 9999, 9999 here. So it's just a one port forwarding from your router. So that is now working, and you can see that we have the Caddy2 domain up here. And we can also go to allscan over here as our other domain. And you can see here that we've got allscan.mostlychris.com. Again, :8443, because everything that hits that proxy is going to go to port 8443. You can see now that I have both of those running through the proxy. So I'm going to end it right there. Just a couple of notes on, comparing Nginx to, let's say, Caddy or Caddy to Nginx or Apache. By default, Caddy comes with automatic support for HTTPS by provisioning those certificates I talked about. It's the only one to provide these features out of the box of the three Apache Nginx Caddy, and it also comes with automatic redirection of HTTP to HTTPS. So that's a nice security feature. The configuration files are much smaller, and it runs TLS 1.3, which is the newest standard of transport security. The only drawback in terms of performance is that if you were running Nginx for multi-thousands of connections per second or whatever, Caddy might not be able to keep up with that. So for us in the hobbyist world and running our own little home labs and things like this, Caddy's perfect. For those of you running enterprise environments, maybe not so much. So keep that in mind when you're looking at this. The only other thing about Caddy is it's got a smaller market share, which means that the resources development and whatnot may not be as big as something like Nginx or Apache. But again, everything has its place. This may not be a fit for you. This may not be a fit for specific scenarios, but it is another option for connecting to stuff internally in your home network via a reverse proxy type setup or connecting to Home Assistant. All right. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you spending some time watching the video today. If you're not a subscriber, just hit that button. It's simple, doesn't cost you anything. If you do want to support me, though, you can join the channel. That's a link down below as well. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, etc., and we'll see you on the next video.